Alright, so for this piece of work, what we're going to be doing is a bit more complex, probably one of our more complex node graphs that we're going to be working with. I'm going to jump back to this guy here. There he is. Alright. So we worked before with adding depth of field to our stuff, but we've never really gone into using depth of field for other types of things. Okay, or using the depth channel for other things. So this rendering here is from a 3D program, and if I look at this channel, you'll see that it has a depth pass put into it. Okay, so like on the CG composites, we've used a depth channel before to add a little more depth to that setup. So what we're going to do is this one has a depth channel built into it, and what we can do is we can use that depth channel and create what's called an anaglyph. Okay, now if I look at this anaglyph node, you'll see that we actually have this overlapping cyan and red coloration, and if you looked at this with 3D glasses, you would actually see that this becomes a 3D looking object. Okay, even like back here, you can still see there's a tiny bit of blue here, tiny bit of red there. And what this is doing is it's using the depth information from the depth channel right here, and it's utilizing that in order to create the fake look of having multiple cameras. Typically when you deal with stereoscopy, you're dealing with an actual left view and right view of an image. You have typically two cameras, one's shooting from one side and one is slightly offset. But we can fake it by using a depth channel. Okay, so in this case, this is all I needed to create this depth look, is to do this. Shuffle out the depth from the original image, grade it, copy the depth back into it, and I have these views split up, and I have some eye distorts. I've joined the views, and then I've turned it into an anaglyph. Okay, so that's typically all you need to do a setup like this. However, the difficulty comes when we're shooting a piece of footage. So over here, I have a piece of footage. Now this footage, obviously, there's no depth channel to it. This is just a piece of video that someone shot. Okay, if I cycle through, you can see it's an animated camera. Okay. So what we need to do is we need to create our own depth map so that we can utilize the same technique as the other assignment, as the other example. Okay. So this is going to involve camera trackers, it's going to involve models, it's going to involve cameras and rotos and some really cool, advanced, tricky stuff. But in the end, you'll see the results are pretty neat. Okay. Now here is this, and you can see from here that we have the same kind of 3D thing. And again, you put your 3D glasses on, you'll be able to see that this definitely looks like it's 3D. Now this isn't a perfect match, okay? Meaning that this is all done utilizing a lot of roto shapes. So if I come into here, okay, and I'm going to knock this down so we can actually see it, you'll see that what I'm doing is I'm building my own depth channel. Okay, so I have this coloration here, and as I hover my mouse over these different areas and I look down here in the red, I can see exactly what the depth is. Okay, and the depth is simply how far from the camera that object is. So obviously we have to play the game of, how far an object is away from the camera. All right, so it's going to be a little bit tricky because obviously this might be something you're not used to. But also, if we look at this, you'll see that this is animated too. So the camera moves. You'll see that this thing gets closer and closer. All right, this black shape is the lady part. It's not fully completed yet. Okay, this one might take you a couple weeks to do just because of the amount of tweaking that has to be done to all the colors and all the shapes in order for this to happily get put together. Okay. So as always, we're just going to start a new one. I'm just going to copy this here. So I've read in my footage, and you'll see that it's kind of squished because it's from the green screen camera work website. So I reformatted it, and I left it at 960 just so things go a little bit quicker. Okay, so I just set it to 960 by 540. Remember, we can go down here to New, make our own 960 at 540. Then I went to Distort to fill it in here. If you leave it on the width portion, it leaves it distorted. It just crops it. Okay. Distort. All right, so there we go. Okay. So now the first thing I have to do is I have to track this piece of footage. And that's just a common thing that you're going to have to do every time you get a piece of footage. It needs some sort of animation done to it. Okay. Before I track it though, you'll see there's a lady walking in front of the camera. Now because she's walking in front of the camera, it kind of would get in the way of the tracking points. Okay. So what I need to do is I'm going to create a Roto Shape. And we're actually at the point of, there it is, the point of the class where you should be pretty comfortable creating a Roto Shape. So I don't need to go over every step of this. But just to show you what I did is I created a Roto Shape around her so that I would have an alpha channel of just her. Okay, and it's a loose fit. All it does is just make sure that that she is not going to be included in our camera tracking. Okay, so that's all it is. This just follows her so that when our camera tracker comes in, it's not going to try to track her movement because that'll just confuse the camera. Now if something else was moving in the scene, I would roto that out as well, but for this specific scene, she's the only thing that's moving. Everything else is very static. Alright, so then I'm going to hit Tab and I'm going to add a camera tracker. Okay, and this camera tracker is a 3D tracker, and we've used this before. So our source is a sequence. Our mask is the source alpha, that's her body cutout. The range is the input. See on mine where it says principal view left or right? That's something we haven't set up yet. It'll just be regular. It'll say main, I believe, on yours. Okay, that doesn't matter right now. Free camera is fine. No lens distortion. We've already, if there was any lens distortion, we would have taken that out already. If we know the focal length of the camera, that could help. Okay, we don't in this case because this wasn't a piece of footage we shot. Typically, when I record a piece of footage, I write down the focal lengths so I have that information ready to go. In this case, I did not. We don't have it. Same thing with the film back preset. If we have that information, we can utilize that. And I believe that if I go to their website, Hollywood Camera Work, and I go to their tracking plates, which is what this is, sometimes it'll say this was shot with a certain camera. And this one doesn't say what it was shot with. Okay, but sometimes you'll see that the footage that you get with these things is listed there. There it is. Actually, it was up here. I just scooted by it. So all the HD plates are shot at 1080p and 720p, and shot with an HVX 200, usually at 100 megabytes per second DVC Pro. Okay, so this HVX 200 is this Panasonic camera. It's actually the kind of cameras that we use at the college for our stuff. So this really helps kind of narrow in some of the features of it. So what I'm going to do is go here and say HVX 200 sensor size. And what this is going to give us is that film plate size. So here we go. So way down here on the bottom it says 4.6809 by 2.6330. Okay, so that's typically, it says that's close enough, and that's the one I've always used. This, you'll see the film back here is set to 36 millimeters. This 4.6809 by 2633. Okay, that's also set to millimeters. 2.6. There we go. Okay, so that gives us the film back size, so that will obviously help. And if for some reason that they had the actual, camera in here, we could find the camera, but we don't have that information. Okay. All right, so then we're going to hit track. Oops. Let's stop this. I didn't want to hit track yet. I just jumped the gun on that one. What I want to do is clear the track. So there we go. And I'm going to go to the settings. Okay. And in here, I want to preview the tracks first. So I'm going to hit preview features. And when the lady is out here, that's where I want to look at this. Because I want to verify that all my tracking points are coming in out here. Okay. If for some reason my tracks were landing up on her, if I just go back to my camera tracker and set this to none, you'll see that I might get some tracks that are landing right on her. Okay, because again, it finds contrast. There's contrast right there, so that's where it's putting it. We have our mask though, so we shouldn't end up with any on her at all. Alright, so I'm going to increase the number of features. So let's say 400. We also have a detection threshold. Typically that's fine. Feature separation is typically fine. Minimum length, we can change that later. Everything else should be fine. Okay, again, this would say main for you. Okay, everything else is good. So I'm going to go to camera tracker and now hit track. And it's going to go through the process of going through and tracking out all of the stuff. As we look at this, you can see all these little dots around here. And this is it tracking all of these different pieces of contrast and trying to figure out how this entire camera is moving. So these tracks on the ground are obviously going to move different than the tracks in the trees and the tracks on the truck. And so it's going to try to figure out how everything's moving and create a solution for us at the end. So I'm going to let it go through. It's going to go all the way down to the end, and then it'll go all the way back. And once it's done, then we can take a look at it from there. Alright, so it finished zipping through, and you'll see now what we have on the screen is a bunch of like squiggly lines, and these squiggly lines are all the tracking information. So some of these are good, some of these are bad. We'll find out which ones are good and which ones are bad in a second. So if I go to here and say solve, it's going to read all the information of how every single one of these points is moving and create a solution. Okay, and here's our error, 0.44. That's actually a pretty low error. So we actually did a pretty good job. All of these are green, which means it is a pretty accurate solve in what it came up with. Now you can see there's a red point here that's kind of big. And you can see the rest of these are pretty good. Here's a couple of the red ones. You can see that their error is at 0.501. So we actually did, it's a pretty decent solve, right? So now what I'm going to do is create a camera. Okay, so this is the output. Oops, created two cameras. This is the output here, okay? And if we were going to give this to a client, we could just give them this camera here, and they could take this with the footage, and they'd be able to recreate the scene pretty much, okay? Right now this is linked, so you see this is link output. If I created another camera, you'll see this one isn't linked, okay? And what that means is that if I change something on here, it would change it on there, okay? Without it linked, it wouldn't do that. Alright, there we go. So now what I'm going to do is I can go to auto tracks here, and just so you can see, here's a bunch of information about it. So the track length is the minimum track length is about 20 or so. Okay, looking at these, this is the shortest amount of range that we have at track length. The track length average is anywhere from about 70-ish to about 120 almost. Okay, and the max is all the way up here at 100 and something, 160 it looks like. Minimum length is right there. Okay, the minimum length is at about 3 almost. And that's what we set inside of here. Minimum length is 3. We could go back and change these things and modify that. So if we say the minimum length is now 15, we can do that and say update solve or update track, and it'll go through and it'll actually update all those things. Okay. Here's our solver error. Here's the minimum. Here's the RMS, which is like the average. Here's our tracking. Here's our max. Okay. A lot of these, you just kind of look at them and say, yep, that's good or bad. If you had, there's the max tracks error. I don't know why they even have this here, but this is what this is, max tracks error. Here's the max error, which is 4.11. Now, either one of these I could knock down and then update my solves, and it'll give me typically a better solution. But I think at the 0.44, I think we're good. Okay. So now that we have this, what I need to do is I need to go through and not click there. I need to create a model builder. So I'm going to go to model builder here, and I'm going to connect the camera to that. My source is going to come from my camera tracker. And then I hit preview. There we go. Something was in the way there. And I want to start building the models for this scene. Okay. Essentially, how this setup works is I have my model builder, and all this is doing is just pumping out models for me to use. Okay. The rest of this is going by and coloring it. So if I look here, 2, there's number 1. Okay. And let me unlock my camera. So what I have here is a plane, and this plane represents the background. Okay, so you can see the street, you can see the background. And this is essentially, as my camera moves, you can see how it would move inside there. So basically what I'm doing is isolating elements. Okay, so I'm isolating the background and the ground as one element. Now it doesn't match perfectly. You can see that this is actually kind of like slanted down and this is up. That's not going to matter. Okay, all that matters is that it follows it. My other piece of geometry is the truck part, and again you can see how, pull this, it's not going to update anything. Go from this view so you can see it. Again, the camera is going to kind of follow that. So basically rebuilding this scene in 3D inside of Nuke. Okay, so that's what we want to do. So over here, I'm going to set this again to 1. And I can open up this model builder so I can look at that. There we go. So I hit 1 on here. I hit tab to get back to my 3D mode. And then I have to set this to the camera and then say lock. Okay. So all of those steps are necessary in order for me to get that locked into seeing through the model builder. Okay, so we go to the model builder, make sure we've double clicked it so we can see the node, we're viewing it, and then we have to choose the camera and click this lock, and then we can start manipulating stuff on here. So I want to pick a frame that has the most detail of the scene. So as I go back to the beginning here, you can see it's a wider shot, and as we get closer, we do see more of this stuff, but that's not going to be really important for us right now. But the rest of this, basically we're kind of zoomed out, let's say here, and there it's a bit tighter. So I want to go back to the beginning and do all my work here. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go and create a card. Okay. Now before I go and create a card, I want to go over here to the shape defaults, and I'm going to set my card's rows to 1 and 1. Okay, and the rest should be good. All right, so I'm going to go over here now and create a card. And it says, add the card in progress, press escape to cancel. So I'm just going to click and drag right about there. Okay, and then I need to create where this card is going to be. Now I don't have anything on the ground really that I can lay out. So what I want to do is I want to line this up to this patch of grass. Okay, so I'm clicking, like my model builder. Nope, it's just thinking. There it goes. All right, and we'll move this over to this patch of grass right about, I don't know, let's say here at this fence post. Okay, something where we can tell exactly where that's at. And then for this, I'm just going to move it across. This guy will be way back here, about where that grass would be ending. And then there's one more point. Where did he go? Let me undo that. Oh, I grabbed both points apparently. Alright, let's try this again. So moving the 1 point. And I may need to move these in, stages just because it's too much of a movement and it kind of freaked out. Okay, so right now it doesn't really look like that's what the grass is doing. So I'm going to pull this one down a bit and pull this one over a bit. There we go. So that looks like it's a pretty accurate representation of that patch of grass. Okay. Now it doesn't go all the way to the left, all the way to the right. It doesn't go all the way forward. We'll fix that in a few minutes. Okay. So now it's kind of placed this, but it doesn't know exactly where this is in space. This could be like the truck part of it or whatever. So I'm going to go to further on here. Let's say frame 50, I think might be good. Nope, the girl's in the way. So let me go back a bit more to about here. Okay, so right about here, I can adjust this. I'm just going to move this right about there. Okay, and what we should see now is that this tracks pretty well. Okay, when we get to the end of this, if it's still not in the same spot or still not in the right spot, I can tweak it. I think I want to tweak it maybe about there. Okay. So I'm going to pull this over to where the fence post is, where the grass meets the ground. There we go. And that gives me a bit more accurate representation of that tracking. Okay, you can see that it meets the road and the grass a lot better than it did inside there 2 seconds ago. Alright, so that's pretty good. Alright, so now that we have this, then we can right click on this. Oops. I have to go to my tools menu. Right click on this and go to edge selection and grab this edge, and I can just slide it over. Grab this edge, just slide it over. Okay, and I will see that that still tracks fairly well. I'll grab this red and slide that further. There we go. It should be good. There is a little bit of a delay as I scrub through and it updates that. So don't be surprised if you see it and it just kind of like jumps into position like it does. See, even here it's kind of a bit off. So I'm going to go back to my adjustment. Oops, and I click the adjustment and it adjusted itself. So it was still just trying to update. Yep, see, it did it again. Alright, cool. Alright, so that's pretty good. So now let me take the tool here, the edit mode. I'm going to right click and go to edge selection still, make sure we're still on that. And then I can just grab this and pull it out. Zoom out a touch. There we go. And again, we're still tracking good. Now we have the ground built. Okay. So then what I'm going to do is grab the back of this, right click, and say extrude, and then I can pull this up for the fence area. Okay. So I'm not looking at the truck right now. I'm looking at just the back of what's happening back there. Then I can extrude this again. And it becomes a bit tricky to do this. We can't go through, unlock my camera here, and see what we're doing here. So we just have to kind of eyeball it a bit. So I'm just kind of eyeballing where that's going to end up. Then I can go back to my camera, lock it in. Okay, and that's about where the top of the cars are. About here. Okay. Now if I wanted to become a little bit more accurate with this, I could even isolate this inside here. So I can right click and say carve, even subdivide. It's thinking, it's thinking, it's thinking. There you go. So it's subdivided that edge. So I have two areas that I could then pull off of to manipulate it. Okay, I'm going to subdivide this one as well. I could also do this carve one, which allows me just to click, click, and click, hit enter. And now I have a separate area where I can grab this edge and extrude. Okay, now it looks like it's coming forward, so I want to push this back a bit. There we go. Okay, so that's good for that. Now I'm going to grab both of these, or all three of these, and let's see. At this point, I'm just going to swap to my regular camera so I can do a little bit more manipulation here. Okay. So I'm in edge selection mode. I'm going to grab this back edge, grab this, grab that, grab that. I'm going to hit the wrong button on accident. Go back to my 3D view. There we go. So I'm going to go to edge selection, right click and go to extrude, and I'm going to push this back. So that's basically like the top of the cars. Okay. And then what I can do is just extrude this one more time and just pull this up. Okay, so that'll eventually be like the background, like the trees and stuff like that. Okay, so again I can swap to my camera, click the button, and you can see we've gone pretty far inside there, so that should be plenty of room for us. And I'm trying to see where my move tool went. It appears to have disappeared. Select edges. I'm on that tool. Alright, I had to switch this back from surface normal to world axis. I'm not sure how that got checked off. And I keep hitting Z because I'm thinking in Maya, I need to hit Control Z if I'm trying to undo anything. There we go. Now I can pull that up nice and straight. They would knock it back so it's kind of in line with the rest of the other one. Okay. And just to be safe, I like to make sure that I have plenty of room. Pull it really far up. Same thing with this other side here. I'm going to change it to object axes if I can just pull it straight out like that. There we go. So that should be good there. Okay. So now I have my ground. I have the little hill with the cars on it. And then I have my background. Okay. So now what this is going to do is if we switch back to our regular camera, click the lock, and we hit play, you'll see how this is pretty much moving with the scenery like it should. Okay, now it might be off in a couple spots. We can always go back to the align tool and tweak some stuff, but for the most part we shouldn't have to do that. Okay. Okay, so this is just like I said, background, and right now it fills the entire background, so we're good with that setup. All right, so now what I need to do is I need to basically draw in the coloration here. Okay. So again, ignoring the truck, ignoring the lady, I need to draw in how far from the camera these items are. So I'm assuming that these bushes are closer than that. Obviously they appear to be that way inside our picture. This ground right here is closer than the ground right there. Okay. Now there is kind of this like arc that would happen typically, but we're not going to be able to get that accurate with it. We're going to try to do our best to make this as accurate as we can. But there are limitations to this, okay? And one of our limitations is time. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start to draw some stuff. Now before I do that, I need to extract this item that we just built, okay? So I have this, but this is not an actual 3D piece. So I'm going to take my card now and go to my selected geometry, and I'm going to bake that selected geometry, okay? There's a couple other options too. There's a projection, and you'll see, look at that. It does a lot of this work. Oops. Out of there. A lot of this work right here is actually set up for some other stuff that eventually, you could utilize inside of Nuke as well. I'm going to close Maya, and hopefully it'll go a little quicker. There we go. Okay. So we've baked out this piece of geometry, which is right here. And so now we actually have that piece of geometry. Okay. So now we have this piece of geometry. And again, if this was something going to another department, we could just export this piece of geometry. Because actually under here, 3D, there it is. There is write geometry. So we could write that out and send it over to someone. Okay. So in this case, we're not going to do that. All right. So what I want to do is I want to texture this with the colors that I'm choosing. Now, if I just to show you, if I chose color bars and I drop it on here, you'll see how it gets laid out. It's not very pretty. Because this is a 3D object now, the texture doesn't get placed nice like a 3D object typically would. Okay. Now I could actually export this piece of geometry out, bring it into, let's say, Maya or something, and paint what I think the texture would look like. Okay. But in this case, we're not going to do that. We're going to do a different method that's going to give us a little bit more ability to tweak inside of here. So we're going to utilize a projection. So the way that the projection works, project 3D, is I have a camera and I have an image. So this gets connected to this. Okay, so it gets connected right to the card. Now for my camera, I want to grab this camera. So I'm going to say edit, copy, click up here and paste it. Okay. Now I want to Click this and drag that there. And if I watch this, let me just drop in a texture here. So I'm just going to drop in the color bars again. Okay, put that on here. And so what happens is our camera actually projects the texture right onto our object. And as we move, you'll see that that is going to move as well. Now we don't want this to typically move. I want that to stay exactly where it was. Okay, from frame 0, I want this to stay locked on. So on camera 7, I'm going to right click on these nodes on the graph there and say no animation. Right click, no animation. Yes. Okay, so now if I scrub through, you'll see that it stays locked on. All right, but what this is going to do is allow me to paint this texture, okay, on here, and then as this camera moves, it'll stay locked into the position that it was in. Okay, and part of this, you know, we're going to be doing this further down in the chain, so you just have to trust me that that's the way it's going to work. So we have our camera with no animation here, going into the project 3D, and then our other image here will be the color we want to color it, and that'll go into our card right there. Okay, so I want to paint what I want this to look like, what I think that the coloration should look like. So I'm going to borrow this stuff, and I'm going to start painting over here. Okay, so I could have linked it, but I just don't want to cross the streams. So I'm going to look at this, and I'm going to create some roto shapes that will color this stuff. Okay, so as an example, let's go here and start creating a roto. And I'm just going to click here. Let's move that in a second. And we'll put down here. There. I can get rid of that point. There's no need to have 2 points there. Okay. I'm going to pull this up to about here. Pull this down to about there. Just want to make sure it's big enough for the scene. Okay. So looking at this, I want to create not an alpha channel. I want to create an RGB channel. Okay, actually RGBA. And right now it's white, so down here my values are set to 1. So I need to have these basically gradate from close to the camera, which would be 0, let's say, because it's close to the camera, or even like, let's say 1 is at the camera and 2 is way back here, or 2 is actually way back in the corner. So I need to have it gradate from the closest distance to the furthest distance. Okay, so there's a couple ways that we can do that. I could create another roto on top of this. And over here where we see the double bars, I could actually change this to be a plus, a multiply, a minus, a whatever. Okay, so if I set it to plus, and I'm just going to drag out some feather handles here just so we can see it. Alright, it's hard to see, but as I drag my mouse over this area, I'm now starting off at 1.8 back here and gradually getting back over here to 1.0. Okay, so that's basically what I want to happen, but I don't want it to be like, you know, this. I want it to be the other way. So let me just delete that one. I'll remake another one. So I'm just going to put a little box right here from the drawing tool. Okay, and I'm just going to pull this out. Okay, and I'm going to try to line these up so that it's still in line with the other one. Okay. So now if we look at this, really close to the camera, we're at about 1. And then all the way back here, we're still at 1 because I didn't change this to be a plus. There we go. So now let's look at this. Okay, so right here at 1.08, you'll see that I gradually get back to this corner, and I'm at 1.94 all the way back here. Okay, I can even go here and wait for it to update and see that I'm actually getting further as I go this way too. Okay, and that's exactly what I want to happen. All right, now I could also pump this up. If I went to my color here, even though this value is set to 1, I could actually make this 2. And what that will do is it'll add 2 way back here. So now I'm at 3 in my red, and then closer to the camera I'm still at 1. Okay, because it's still gradating that change. All right. The trick to this is it's going to be a bit difficult to even see what's happening on here. So typically I want to have sort of a grade. Oops. That I could manipulate to look at this gradation and see that it's going to start off here. You know, it says 0.4 now, but it's not. And then it'll come down here. So I want to see this gradation. I can just disable that grade and turn it on, turn it off as much as I need to. Okay. So that's what we're going to be doing for this. Now I do want to have a little bit of overlap in these, so there will be some overlap between these two. All right. So I want to start labeling these. So let me grab these and Nuke is just acting very slow. There we go. So I right-clicked on root and added a new layer, and that I can just drag these guys into. Okay, now to make sure that 1 is under 2. Okay, not that it's going to matter for the math, it just is for consistency. It's going to make things a little bit easier to read. There we go. So I'm going to rename 2 to be my ground feather. I'm going to rename 1 to be my ground. I'll rename this one to be ground. Ground underscore group. There we go. Alright, so that's locked in. Alright, so now let's go through, and I want to make sure that this thing is obviously going to move with it, because anything we're pointing at is not going to work. Okay, so right now you'll see that it's not moving. It's just kind of like floating in space. Okay, so if I go to further down here, I want to connect my new image to that roto. Okay, the color bars are just to test it out to see, but this is going to be my actual projection, is this roto shape. Okay, so now if I look at my model, we should see that the ground is completely white, right? Because that's the part that we painted. We just painted the ground to be white. Okay, now eventually, I'm not going to need this, so I can actually just disable that, and I'll be left with just this ground. And so as our camera that's over here on the right begins to move, you can see how it's just going to, there it is. Oops, camera 6. As camera 6 is going to move, you'll see how it's going to get closer and further away from that plane that's sitting there. Okay. We can go a little bit further and do a little bit more setup on this just to kind of verify what we're going to see. So I'm going to create a scene node, and that's how we connect all this stuff together. So I want this camera, I want this model, and then I need to obviously render this out, so I'll add a scanline renderer. And for my camera again, I'll click there. Alright, so now let's go through and preview this. And here's what the rendering is going to look like. Okay, so as we hit play, you'll see that we have this piece of geometry. And it's going to move with our camera. So the geometry is not really moving, it's just moving around where our camera is. Now it does kind of cut off a bit here, and obviously a bit at the front. But we can adjust that as we go. Okay, because we're not fully done with this yet. We just want to have some spot we can come back and test. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my Roto and continue working on that. Undo that. Okay, so now I can open up my Roto, save my work, obviously. We haven't done that in a minute. I'll make a new group here, a new layer, and this will be called, let's just call this Hill. Okay, and this is going to be behind the other one, so I'm just going to drop this down, and I'm going to start creating my roto shapes for this. So I'm going to start off underneath it. I'm going to go up to about there. Okay, right about there. Then I'm going to do the same little trick. I know I'm going to have to go from here up. This is a bit further away from the camera, so here it's going to be darker, there it's going to be lighter. So I'm going to add a Bezier. Now this one's going to be a little bit trickier because of where it's at. Okay, so here, let me do this one as I can click on this. Oops. Trying to make a new one, not add to that one. There we go. Alright, let me turn off the ground so I don't have to see that right now. Okay. Okay. So I can take this and just feather that up. And then I can set this to be minus. Okay, so now here at the bottom you'll see that this is set to 0.1, and then way at the top this is set to almost 1. Okay, so I can just go through and adjust some of my colors. So my Bezier 1, I can set my value to, let's say, 3. Okay, so it's going to go from 2.23 here to 2.3 all the way to the top. There we go. Okay, now if we look at this, we'll see here is my start of this is at 1.14, and it's going to go back all the way to this corner to about here at 3. And then for my other one, for my hill, it's going to start here at about 2.13 and come up to about 3. Now here's where it's going to get a little tricky. Let me disable my roto for a second. The values for this and this should be pretty similar. Okay, there shouldn't be a huge difference in value for these two items. Okay, because they're really close together. So as I come in here, you can see there is a bit of a difference. So I want to adjust that. So I'm going to go back to my hill, go back to my Bezier 1, and I just need to knock this down to maybe 2.5. Okay, and get these values a bit closer. So now we're going from 1.47 to 1.63, it looks like. Okay, so maybe a little bit lower, even 2.4. All right, that seems a bit more appropriate. Okay, we could even go to 2.3. There we go. Now we have a nice transition going right into it. Okay, so now that's going to work pretty well. Pull that up just slightly right there. Okay, so that's good. Now I also, if I look at the value here, I want to look at the value far away. It's 2.03, and the value way up here is at 0.5. Sorry, not 2.03, it's 0.3. I'm going to disable my ground for a second so we can take a look at this. Okay, it is 2.03 here. As we get way up here, it's 2.18. So I also want to gradate this going that way as well. So I'm on the hillside. I'm going to create another gradient. On this side. This side's always going to be the bigger one. So I'm always going to come to this one and gradate downward. Okay, I could do it again the other way. You know, just using a minus instead of that. So I'm going to drop this into hill. On top of that. Alright, I need to turn off number 2 and 1 here. So it's getting in the way. Now this could also be done inside of Photoshop, but Photoshop's not going to allow us the editability that Nuke's going to allow us to have. Okay, because in the end you may want to come back and tweak some of your values. Something might be a little bit too low, a little bit too high, and you want to be able to tweak that. Okay, so turn these guys back on. Doot and doot. And let's see, we can set number 3. Set that to a plus. Okay, so now we're all the way up here at 3.16, and way down here we're at 1.49. Okay, and then way on the top we're at 2.3. That's 3.1. Probably add a little bit more to that one, just because it's so far away. So I'm going to add to the value here, let's say 1.25. A little bit more. I'm looking at the one on the ground, and that's 2.9, so it would obviously be higher than that. So 1.75. There we go. That looks good. Alright, so we're good there. Okay, now again, this isn't going to be a perfect solution. It's just going to be, you know, a pretty good one. So we can see how these values are now gradating into these other ones. Okay, and eventually, too, we're going to be doing a blur on this. So these things will actually be blended together a lot nicer. Oops, look at the blur. Let me get rid of my grade. Okay, so these values will become a lot nicer and a lot more, a lot smoother together because we've added that. Okay, so let's go back to the Roto. And then I'm going to add ones for the rest of this stuff here. Okay, So we just go back to our roto. Now we could add another roto too. We don't have to do everything inside of one roto if it becomes too complex or too confusing. Some people just prefer to do that. For this, I'm just going to do, for the background thing, just keep doing the same thing I'm doing here. Drop it to the bottom because it's behind everything. Oops. I didn't want you to go in there. There we go. Okay, so this will be the trucks. Or the back of the trucks. BG vehicles. Okay. And again, we can always look at that project, if we get confused as to where each piece is being handled. Oops. Okay, that next step should be all my cars. So, all of those things. So, I can do these individually. I think I like to do them all as one big one. Okay, and the trick to this is that you get a base value, and then you just start manipulating it from there. And it's not going to matter what I do here because it's, the vehicle's in the way. And that will be occluded because we'll have another layout for this U-Haul truck. And that'll just be on top of the rest of it. Okay, so we're building this in 3D, but eventually it'll be a 2D item. I'm just going to subtract that point there. Okay. So now looking at the value of this, this is 3 units away. That's how far away this top white area is. So that's further away, so obviously that's going to be a bit, obviously a bit further. So I can use this as my starting point, 3.4. Yeah, about 3.4, okay? So that's about 3.4 units away. That's how far that guy is. And then I'll grab another vehicle here. And you can see I'm not being 100% accurate on this. I'm just kind of outlining this and getting the general gist of it. Once I add that blur to it, that'll kind of seal the deal on some of them. Now again, it's not going to be a mint 3D stereoscopic transition. It's going to be a good one, just not full on. We'd have to spend a lot more time tweaking this. We would even have to do like models for each cars, or drawings for each one, and whatever. I don't want to do that. All right, so I'm gonna get the values of this 3.31. So obviously further away, so 3.45. Actually, this area, let me turn my vehicles off just to make sure I'm not adding to that or manipulating these other values here. There we go. So I am 3.8 for this and 3.4 back here. All right. So I'm going to go with 3.8 for these front vehicles. There we go. Okay, so I have that on. I have the truck on. And then what I can do is just add my gradation to that. And I think what I'm going to do for this too is add the background in here as well. And the background is just going to be a simple shape. Okay. And again, we want to look at the values. This is 3.8 at the most. So let's go and put them back further at like 9 or 8. It's far enough back where it looks like it's, you know, where that's where the trees would be. Okay. And then for these guys, I'm going to take this side, this, and I'm going to drop it between these two. Okay, this is going to be set to be a plus. And so now in the top right corner, we're at 9.4. And then in the bottom corner here, before we get to the other one, we're at 8.4. So 8.9, 8.4. Let's see, the vehicle is at 3.8. Gradated down to a 3.4. Okay, so that just gradates all of the stuff that's underneath that. All right, so let's look at the blur again. And you can see it's a pretty nice shape that we're dealing with here. We can see where the ground is, we can see where this is, we can see where that is, and we can see where these things are here. Okay? And then if I go back to my scanline render, I'm going to add a grade to this as well so I can see it. There we go. Now you'll see the scanline render is going to come out and it's going to be kind of like dotty. The settings are not turned up on this. So I can go to my scanline render. I can take my multi-sample and pull this up. And that will, of course, smooth some of those transitions. I can also add a blur to this after and fuzz this a bit too. As we get more complex, it's just going to start taking Nuke a bit longer to have to do this kind of stuff. There we go. So now you can see how it's nice and soft, and we have some nice transitions from one spot to the other. So way over here we're at 0.47, closer to the camera we're at 0.14. Okay, 0.43 to 0.47. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. I'm just going to disable my grade, disable my blur. Alright. And now I'm getting to the spot where I, of course, want to save. But I want to start checking this out and make sure that this is, you know, looking the way I want it to look for my 3D part of this. Okay. So we're going to create a couple things. We need to create a copy node, because all we're doing in here, this whole process here, is to create a depth node. That's what this whole thing is for. Okay, we're all just creating a depth node and making sure that it moves with the camera. And of course, we didn't. It's one of the things I wanted to look at. Okay, again, it cuts off, but we can patch that in as we start tweaking our stuff. But you'll see that it moves with it. Now, I can't see, you know, obviously, if it's lined up right. So I could just do a merge real quick. There's my B. Let's see, there's my A up here. There we go, I just switch them. And now it becomes a bit more apparent that it definitely is working. Okay, I can see the line of the grass, I can see the line of this. Obviously we need to go further up in that. Okay, and the reason it's cutting this off too is because of our camera. Our camera is only projecting a certain distance, so we can't really tweak that right now. All right, so for right now we're good as it sits. Okay, so that's cool. Oops. I like to leave this stuff plugged in so I can always jump back to these spots to preview it. So this is like my preview, so I could always add a backdrop. You know, that way I know that this is my testing area for this. Alright, so now let's get to the actual 3D part of this. So we need to copy the depth channel we're creating into our original footage. Okay, so here's just like I have here. Here's the original footage reformatted, and then we're added that in there, and then we're going to do the splitting up. All right, so the first thing I need to do is I'm going to click on my background and hit S, and then over here under views I need to click set up views for stereo, and then you'll get this left and right camera setup. Okay, now once it's on, so you just leave it there. All right, so let's first do that. So here is my original footage, and again I'm just going to copy this just so I have it down here. So I'm going to K copy. I want to copy this information into this piece of footage. Okay, so that should basically doesn't change anything right now. I'm going to copy the red channel into the depth. So if we come to this and I look at my depth, you'll see that now the depth looks like that channel. Beautiful. Then I need to take this and do a split and join. Okay, that's what they call it. So over here under the eye, there's a split and join. Okay, and so what this does, it splits the views left and right, and then it joins them back together. Now I could have just gone in here and created a one view for each eye, and then created a join views, and that's acceptable as well. That's what that is. So after the left eye, I need to create an eye distort. And this one, I need to create an eye distort. Okay, and I'm going to make sure that on each eye distort, the UV channel that's set up is using the depth channel. So use depth here. And use depth there. Okay, now right now they're going to look the same. If I join the views together, it's going to look the same. There's a couple things to note. Left and right here, that's what the left and right channels are looking like. I could also use the semicolon and apostrophe to cycle between these. Okay, but right now they're the same. There's no change in them. Okay, I have to make that change. So for the eye distort left, I keep this positive number right here. This UV scale is set to 1. Leave it there. For the eye distort right, I take this and make it negative. Okay, so now if I were to cycle back and forth, you'll see there's a slight shift. Okay, and you can see it typically like in the background area where most of this is going to happen. So now if I go down here after my join views and I add an Anaglyph node, it's there, it's just super duper slight. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my eye distorts and make this, instead of 1, I'll make it 5. And instead of this one being 1, I'll make it -5. And so now if we look at this, you see we definitely get that separation here a lot, but closer to this we don't. So if you put on your 3D glasses, if you have them, it becomes more apparent that we definitely have some sense of 3D happening to this. Now again, it's not 100% accurate. If you looked at lines, you'd probably see some weird stuff. The truck, even though it says U-Haul left and U-Haul right, this is not 3D. This is just borrowing the 3D from the background. So it's not very accurate. Okay. So we just wanted to do that step just to make sure that everything is working. And it appears to be working. So that's cool. So then we can just continue on with this process of creating these. Okay. So this project 3D here, this is for our background. Background project 3D. There we go. Okay. And then here's our model builder for this. So again, that is our background model. Okay, and I started off as a card and it just became a card. So now I need to create the truck. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my model builder right here. This is where it gets confusing because we have so much stuff kind of going on. You know, this is really the big chunk. I'm just going to scoot this over. This is where all the magic is happening inside here. And the rest of this is just kind of like preview areas and setups to get that other stuff to work. Okay, so I'm going to go to my model builder. Same thing, pick the camera. I have two cameras. It's going to be camera 6. I click the lock. I double click my model builder to open it, and there we go. Okay, so now I'm going to model the truck. Okay, and again, we're going to keep it very simple in how we do this. So I'm going to go to here, I'm going to create a cube. And I'm just debating real quick. I can actually create a card. Okay. And the card I'm just going to drag in right here to the edge of this. Now again, I'm at frame 0. I rewound myself to back to frame 0. Okay, back to the align tool. And I use this guy here to align me better. Okay, I'm going to drag this corner. Now keep in mind where things are actually at. There's actually like a little step here, so I don't want to go all the way down to the bottom. I want to go to the bottom of the step. Now there's other ways to do this too. We could have tracked each piece individually and used our Roto Shapes to manipulate each piece, but this way is, you know, it might seem like a lot of work, but it is a lot easier. Right about there. Okay. So now I'm going to go up a bit. So let's say I go up to frame 25 or so. Nuke will let me. There you go. And then I'm just going to click and drag. You'll see that it kind of keeps you in line. Okay, because it knows sort of what perspective we're at. It knows sort of where that object is. So I just want to come in and just double check. That looks good. Okay, and the rest looks good there. Again, I can skip forward a bit more. I want to be able to see all the corners and tweak. That's good. Yep, that's good. All right, so cool. So that piece is all set. So now I can go through back to 0 here, and I can start to extrude this to create the shape of it. So I'm just going to go to my edit tool. I'm on edge selection still, and I'm going to grab these. Let me turn that back card off. There we go. So card 2 is the truck. Card 1 is the background. There we go. So I want the truck one. I'm going to grab all the edges for this, and I'm going to right click and go to extrude. Then I can just pull this out like so. And of course I want to tweak it. Okay, nothing's going to be ever perfect on the first go around, especially, you know, when we're dealing with taking a 3D or a 2D image and converting it into a 3D image. There we go. So that's actually where that should be, is kind of tucked inside the truck a bit. Alright, there we go. Okay, so again, let me grab those outer edges. And there's another tool. I can right click, and I can go to select edge loop. There we go. So I select the edge, go to select edge loop, and then I can extrude again. And pull this out. And then just manually grab each edge and put it where it needs to be. So just moving these edges into position. And every once in a while I'll go through and actually, play the animation, make sure it's animating correctly. Don't be afraid to zoom up on this stuff. And skip here. And see, make sure everything's following it. And I switch back to the Align tool, because that will allow me to realign some of these points. Let's go there. And if you mess up, you can actually just go back to that keyframe. So that was at 111. It's in blue. And I can say delete all keys for frame. There we go. And I'll just go back to where it was. Okay. Just remember, it's not going to be 100% perfect. You just want to get a good representation of this. If you had a model of this U-Haul truck, like, sometimes we'll actually have a model of the truck, you can use that as well. Alright, so let's go back to edges. Oops, the tool, there we go. Edge selection is on. Okay, now I don't need to grab the entire thing because I don't see the back of the truck. So there's no point in extruding this entire truck. It's more for just this side view. So I'm just going to go to extrude and pull it down. You'll see the perspective, bam, that's perfect pretty much. Yeah, I'm actually going to pull it back a touch. There's a little corner taken off of this that I wanted to make sure I'd had. Let me go to carve, and I can just drop in another point right here. And I can go back to my edge and pull that out. There we go. And I could also right click and go to vertex, and that's the little points that I added, and that would work as well too. Okay, so there's that. Let's take this one. I'm just going to extrude it. I'll grab this too. Extrude both of those. Pull that down. I'm going to right click and grab this face. And extrude that face out. Okay, go back over here, right click and go to my carve tool, click where I want to cut that. Go back to my edge selection. Go. And I'll right click again and go to extrude. Pull that out. Now it doesn't, I can do this different ways. I want to carve at this point and say I want to carve this here. And you see how I'm cutting along this line? And then I can grab that face, click it, and delete it. Okay, do the same thing for the wheel wells. I'm in the carve tool. I'm going to wind myself back to the beginning. Carve tool. And I'm just going to draw the wheel well. Alright, something's going on there. Let me just jump to my other camera. I'm going to go to edge selection and just delete these extra edges that are in here. I think it might be an extra edge. Yep. There we go. I had an extra face somewhere in there somehow. Alright, so now I can just take this, scoop these points in. There we go. Do a little curve right here. Come on. Let's grab this edge, and that edge, and extrude. Oops. So do another carve here, right there. And go to vertex, pull that guy out. Okay, there we go. Okay, so then we would do the same thing for the back of this. We go to carve, we draw this shape out here. Go to our face mode. And I'm just going to delete this face. It's not behaving correctly. There we go. There's actually another face right about here. I might have to switch to my other camera to go and grab that. Somehow those are not connected anymore, and they were. Alright, well, I'm going to play with this until that works. But that's going to be the same steps that we've done before. Okay. Now there's also the button I'm hitting. The underside of this too, which we should actually add into this as well. So maybe extruding more of this to kind of capture the underside, splitting some stuff here, carving some stuff out here to pull that down, carving some stuff here to pull this stuff down. It'll just make it a little bit more accurate. Carving this to pull that down. Okay, extruding this here. Let me right click and go to edge loop. Not the edge loop I wanted. This. There we go. Extrude that and shove that inward. Okay. We can also carve up some faces here and extrude this mirror out. Okay, and obviously our line's a little bit off. Let's push this out more. Okay, carve. The face. We can extrude this and just start to shape it. We don't have to get the exact shape. We just want to be able to pull it off. I can also hold down Control Shift and scale this to shrink that down. And I'll extrude it again. Switch to my other camera so I can see the other. I want to grab those two top faces and just pull that up. There we go. Extrude that. Pull them up. Extrude it again. Scale it outward. Extrude it again. Pull it up. Okay, and then I can just go through the vertex selection mode and just start to tweak these guys into place. Looks like I accidentally extruded the vertices and not faces. Yep. Alright, so I'm going to face mode and vertex mode. There we go. Now we just re-extrude this back out of here. just going to switch back to my other camera. Okay, you don't need to see me go through every step of extruding this thing out, extruding that. I still have to fix this. These tires here, there's actually a polygon creation tool that you could use for something like that. So after you're done with the truck model, I can go to the polygon tool, start to draw the shape. And again, we're getting it rough. We're not getting it exact. Enter, scoot it up a bit, and just realign. Oops, go back to my align tool. Just realign where that guy should be. Okay. Now I did it a bit rougher than you probably want to do it. But there we go. Okay, and then I can just go back to my tools, back to my edge selection, back to extrude, and I think I want to change my handle alignment a bit. Nope. I guess that'll work. There we go. So now I have the wheel moving with the vehicle as well. We do the same thing for the front tire too. There we go. Okay. So once you're done with that, you would export the truck out. You would go to bake truck, bake the wheel, bake the back wheel too. The back stuff and the underside I really just used as one big shape. Okay. Even the wheels could be added into the shape. It's just a lot harder to add those wheels into that one shape. Alright, so when you're done with this, you'll have the truck and the two wheels, and then we're going to continue this same process. So I'm going to stop the video here, but in the next video I'll go over the process for creating the truck stuff too. It's going to be the same exact thing we have already done with this roto. You're just going to do it to the rest of the truck. So if you get that far and you want to just continue on, keep continuing on. But if you want to wait for the other one, then that one will be available. Alright, there we go.